gonna do?
I'm gonna record all the noise.
Oh, yeah?
His shouts of joy rang through the room. Did you see? Did you see? Santa got me root beer. He jumped around the room in complete joy, holding a treasured six-pack of root beer.
That has a root beer flavor. I don't know why. Maybe that's an old school flavor, but I can tell you, when people see root beer, they have an expectation about root beer, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And there are those kinds of flavors that really resonate. And you know what? It's almost generational, Brian.
It's true.
Root beer would be probably people in their 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s that would really, back in the day, root beer was a big flavor.
Beer, because she loved root beer. And she comes and sits down and she's like, why did you order me a root beer? I said, well, I knew that's what you wanted. And the thought in her mind was like, you don't know me.
Egg just doesn't seem to be right.
You have, oh my God. And
I
then,
can imagine.
then, you go to a place, like, they'll have a root beer hooked up to a draft line. And going, this IPA tastes a lot like root beer. I'm like,
Wow.
dude.
Really? Come on, man. I did get a root beer because I like root beer, but I didn't get a root beer float. My sister got a root beer float. She was nice enough to let me try a little. The only thing that I didn't find attractive about the A&W root beer float is that they use the soft serve ice cream. And to me, a good root beer float, as I discovered, becoming a connoisseur of it, you needed to have the scoop of good old-fashioned, creamy, real vanilla bean ice cream. Creamy. It's like anything. When you use the Cadillac of ingredients in a good root beer float, oh my God, do you have an amazing taste. But, quite frankly, even the crappiest, the sorriest of store-bought, store-brand ice cream and generic root beer, creamy, still goes together pretty good.
I don't know. I think you might need to go to the bar and ask for a root beer float, see what happens. You get the root beer too, right? Yeah. The root beer's awesome. Here's the next one. Sorry, I'm taking up things with it. And I got your text, Ray, about the Krampus. I'll see what I can do.
Right, so that's what's your one big go-to thing?
My big go-to thing,
Creamy.
root beer float.
Root beer float's nice.
Yeah.
It's good.
I do enjoy it. And it's the one time, actually, a year that I really have it. I mean, I don't really...
Like the root beer float?
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Is there a preferred brand of root beer that you use?
Barks.
Barks is good.
Yeah.
I like root beer is wildly underrated.
You're right.
It is one of the lesser respected drinks of the soft drink category.
You think lesser than soda? It's respected less than soda?
I think it's respected less than like a Coke,
okay,
or a 7-Up, or even a ginger ale.
Okay.
I think, but it's one of those things that when you open a cooler and there's cold root beer, you're like, oh, root beer. Huh?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like nice surprise. So nobody's having a ginger ale float.
Yeah.
You're not doing it.
No.
You're not doing a Sprite float.
No.
You're not doing a Coca-Cola float.
No, it's got to be root beer.
Tonic water float.
Even though,
that would just be so disgusting.
Even though, I'll tell you what. You know what my dad liked? My dad.
Ensign Roger, you're on Talk 99.5. What's up?
Root beer.
A root beer flavored potato chip. Creamy.
Yeah, I just don't really. I drink a root beer every 20 years or so just to remind myself I don't like it.
Man, when I was a kid, I loved me some root beer. I was like a root beer fiend. Now, not so much. Thank you, Roger. Appreciate the call. I was something of a root beer connoisseur. Up in the Northland, they had Dads, right? They had Hires, creamy. For a while, it wasn't available in bottles. You could only get it at their little drive-in restaurants. A&W root beer had the best creamy taste ever. I was an absolute root beer nut. I don't know when I grew out of it, but the last time I had a root beer was an A&W sugar-free root beer. I remember it being pretty good. But I don't think I want a potato chip.
We want 2 big, tall, cold frosty.
Rich and creamy, big foamy head.
Yeah, A&W root beer.
Oh yeah, A&W. Yeah.
Oh, root beer.
This is A&W root beer. It's got that frosty mug taste. It's special.
Ooh, it's special.
yourself a frosty one. A&W Root Beer.
Sometimes it's nice to drink alone.
Anytime's a good time for the good time taste of Barks Root Beer. Cold, refreshing Barks gives every meal a good time taste and makes every good time even better. Ask for Barks Root Beer.
Hello? We meet again.
I'm just letting people know that Barks has bite.
Whoa! Now that you and your dog have seen my lair, I can never let you leave.
Our paths will cross again.
What do you love?
I love my nose. I love my toes. I love to pose, but most of all, I love my mug, root beer. I love my grin. I love my chin, but most of all, I love my mug, root beer.
Finally, a rich, creamy taste sensation with character. Mug old-fashioned root beer.
I love my mug, root beer.
I love it. Aha!
Why do you hold your root beer that way?
Because that's how I hold a frosty mug of A&W.
That's not a frosty mug.
Sure tastes like one.
A&W root beer's got that frosty mug taste. A&W root beer's got that frosty mug taste. A&W root beer's got that frosty mug taste.
We're gonna get you all these little barrels, so you can have a barrel of fun. 'Cause when you tap a barrel head root beer, you get the dirt right over and done. You get a real rich creamy head so nice. A draft style flavor that stands up the eyes. So get the dirt over the barrel in America and have a barrel of fun. Get the dirt over the barrel in
The stagecoach was a-heading through the mountains. The stage they call the Wells Fargo Express. The cargo, so I hear, Fargo old-fashioned root beer. The tasty drink with creamy head goodness. Look out! It's a hold-up! It's Black Bart!
Oh, save me! For my life, I see!
Oh, hush up, gal. It's that famous drink I want. That case of Fargo old-fashioned root beer.
Stand where you are. Black Bart, you are through. So the stagecoach went on heading through the mountains, and old Black Bart went off to jail, I hear.
The Fargo Kid. Which way did he go? Which way did he go? He went for
Now's the time for you to go for Fargo old-fashioned root beer. The big 1-liter bottle is now on sale at participating grocers.
Okay, fellas, a few rules. First of all, I don't want to see any of this. And none of this. Or that. And this. Or that. None of this. Or this. Or that. Absolutely none of this. Okay, touch gloves and fight clean.
Mug root beer. The boom goes straight to your brain.
When you're hot and thirsty, for a refreshing taste, the original, put on a higher space. It's the frosty root beer with the luscious taste. The original, put on a higher space. The original, put on a higher space.
Treat yourself to a creamy, smooth taste. The original.
Put on a higher space.
The original smooth, refreshing taste. Regular or sugar-free. Put on a higher space.
Raven is delicious, it's got something more. It's foamier, down homier, something more. Yeah, it's the richest, smoothest treat you'll ever pour. Rambling, there's something more. So give your thirst a frosty burst of something more.
Something more. Regular or sugar-free? As always, caffeine-free.
High time for hires. Open a bottle. Your time for hires. My time for hires. High time for hires root beer. Open a bottle. Bright happy hires. Bright happy hires. High time for hires root beer. If you want to change your pace, why then the time is here. For the bright and lively flavor of hires root beer. Your time for hires. My time for hires. High time for hires root beer. Open a bottle. Hires.
Hires makes it at the scene, whether you're at a dance with your favorite date, listening to records, or just plain goofing off. I always have a Hires. It's a change of pace drink for tight taste. Feel its fresh tingle on your tongue, man. You'll really dig Hires. It's in the groove.
Your time for hires. My time for hires. My time for hires root beer. Open a bottle. Hires. Splash me A&W tastes so fine, sends the thrill up my spine. Get that frosty mug sensation.
Ooh, that A&W tastes so good, feel it down in my soul. It's so smooth and creamy tasting. Get that creamy frosty mug sensation. Ooh, talking about the A&W.
We've tried them all. The grapefruit diet,
The Malibu diet.
the creative visualization diet.
You were supposed to imagine that this was a fat, juicy cheeseburger?
One thing worked.
Sure, she tried a 1-calorie diet A&W root beer.
And she tried an A&W diet cream soda.
And we had no problem at all imagining we were drinking something fabulously rich and delicious.
Look what I've got.
My favorite, lemon meringue pie.
Diet A&W root beer and cream soda with 100% NutraSweet. There's just more to it.
In this pot, I put 1 liter of water and some ginger that I have chopped up fairly fine. Now you could grate the ginger if you wanted to, just to extract a little bit more flavor. And I'm going to put in 1 cinnamon stick. And yes, I know this isn't true cinnamon. This is cassia. If you can get true cinnamon, use it. But I think the cassia actually brings the punch to this that we're looking for. So I put this in a pot, and I'm going to bring this up to a boil, and I'm going to boil it for 2 to 3 minutes to extract as much flavor as I can from those 2 ingredients. Now we're going to talk about the roots, since this is root beer. Now this is sassafras, and sassafras is the main flavor component in root beer. And I saw a lot of root beer recipes out there on the internet and in books where this was the only ingredient beyond sugar and water. Relied extremely heavily on this one flavor. And I thought it made a pretty good tasting beverage, but I wanted a little bit more complexity. So I started looking at other recipes that added other roots. And the next most popular root is sarsaparilla. And if you watched a lot of old westerns, you would know that the cowboy would go in and he would ask for a sarsaparilla. And that is a variation on root beer that is only made with the sarsaparilla root. And I like the flavor of both of these. Next flavor component that I'm going to use is licorice root. You know what licorice tastes like, that sort of aniseed, dark, sweet flavor. And then I'm going to put in some wild cherry bark. Now, other components that I saw in a lot of recipes and I tried and I didn't like was birch bark. A lot of people put in burdock root or dandelion root or all 3 of those, and I thought they brought kind of an extra bitterness that I didn't want in my root beer. So that's the combination of roots that I landed on, and I would suggest that if you're going to make root beer, go out and look at all of the recipes. And take each of the individual roots and make a cup of hot tea with it. Put in a little bit of sugar and taste it, just so you can get an idea of what that individual root tastes like and what it's going to bring to the eventual end product. I think that's very important to sort of understand what all of the components are. And I'm also giving you this by weight. I came across a lot of recipes that said to use a tablespoon of this and a tablespoon of that. And that's great, but not all of these roots are ground the same way or chopped the same way. And so you would get a big variation in the amount of flavor that you're going to get in the end result, which isn't good either. Weight is always going to give you the same amount of flavor. So this has come to a boil. It's boiled for a couple of minutes. I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to take it off of the heat, and I'm going to add these in. I'm going to give it a stir, and then put the lid back on. And I'm going to let that steep for 15 to 20 minutes just to extract the flavors. Now this is where I diverge from a lot of the recipes that I found. I tried it by putting all of the roots in and boiling it, like I was told, for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and then letting it steep for 2 or 3 hours. And I found that it extracted an astringency, and almost a bitterness, a lot of tannins that caused an unpleasant feeling in my mouth that I just didn't like. Flavor that I didn't like. It wasn't bright and it wasn't cheerful like a root beer should be. And I found that if I never boil the roots, if I boil the water and then add the roots and only let it steep for 15 to 20 minutes, you're going to get really nice, bright flavors without sort of the tannic astringency. So we're going to let this go 15, 20 minutes, and then we're going to strain it out. Okay. Smells amazing. Now we need to filter out the solids, and this is a very important step. If the solids stay in too long, they will continue to release their astringency, and over time it'll start to taste really dull. So we need to strain them out, and we're going to use a fine mesh strainer to get the big bits out. Look at that color. Great. Now that we've got the big bits out, we're going to strain it through a coffee filter. Now, I have used paper coffee filters, I've used double thickness paper coffee filters, I've used double thickness paper coffee filters with this micro mesh filter, and I found that the micro mesh filter on its own gets just as much as the paper filters or any combination thereof. So, we're going to pass it through the coffee filter. Great. Now, I'm going to put a lid on this, and I'm going to chill this as quickly as possible in a cold water bath. I'm going to bring the temperature down fast, and that's going to help whatever is left in here to precipitate out. It's almost as effective as a filter, and in some ways it's our second or third method of filtration. And as soon as that's done, we'll move on. Okay, now that it's chilled down, we need to sweeten it, and we're going to use 2 different types of sugar. But first, we're going to very carefully pour the chilled liquid into this pot. And you don't want to swirl it, you want to pour very carefully, because at the bottom, there's going to be quite a bit of sediment left, and we don't want to transfer that to the pot. Okay, what's left in there is sediment, and that will just make the drink bitter. We don't want that. Now, next in is the sugar. We're using 2 kinds of sugar, and I found that sugar for pop making seems to be very vexing to a lot of people. First thing I'm going to put in is brown sugar. And we've got this on a medium-high heat, and we just want to bring this up to a low simmer so that we can dissolve the sugar into the liquid. We don't want to bring it to a boil, again, because that could introduce bitterness. Just a low simmer. And I'm using brown sugar. A lot of the recipes that I've found use brown sugar or molasses, or a combination of brown and white sugar, or just white sugar, or white sugar and molasses. It was all over the map. And I think it comes down to the flavor profile that you're looking for. I'm looking for that little bit of caramely flavor that comes from the brown sugar. So I'm using all brown sugar as the sweetener. If you want to use another sweetener, a non-sugar sweetener like stevia, I'm sure that'll work. I don't know what the proportion would be. This is something that you can play with and make it as sweet or not sweet as you want. But know this, if you're going to do this as a naturally carbonated root beer, which is part of the process that we're going to move on to, stevia won't work. Yeast needs sugar. So, as this comes up to temperature, I'm going to put in lactose. And obviously, if you're lactose intolerant, you're not going to put lactose in. I'm going to put lactose in for a bunch of different reasons. I use it in actual beer brewing down in the brewery. And as much as it's a sweetener, it's not going to bring a whole lot of sweetness to this drink. And so the lactose is going to do a few things for us. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to give that nice, white, creamy, frothy, foamy head that we all associate with root beer as it spills over the top of the glass in all of the advertising. The second thing it's going to do is going to create a nice, unctuous mouthfeel, a really luxurious, kind of stays in your mouth feel that we all associate with root beer. And as much as I said that it's not going to add a lot of sweetness, if you end up doing a natural ferment or naturally carbonated version with the yeast don't eat, or the yeast that we're using anyway, the yeast that we're using won't eat the lactose or milk sugar, which will in the end help to preserve some of the sweetness. Okay, I think everything is dissolved, and we can pour this into this glass container. And I'm just going to let this cool before we move on to the next step. Now, there's one last ingredient, and that is vanilla extract. Now, I'm going to put in about a tablespoon. I found that anywhere between a tablespoon and a tablespoon and a half gets you where you want to be. And a lot of people are going to ask if you could use vanilla bean. And I've tried it with vanilla beans. I've tried it with double vanilla beans. I found that by the time I steeped the vanilla bean to get the flavor I wanted, I pulled out too much astringency from the roots. And so the best way to get that vanilla flavor is with the extract that I found. And you know, give it a try. If you want to try it at home, please do. So that's all mixed together. Now we're going to diverge. This is your root beer syrup. And you mix 1 part of this with 3 parts of carbonated water, and you get a root beer pop just like you would at the corner store. I'm also going to do a version where we ferment it with our ginger bug, our wild ginger bug. So in here, I'm going to put about 500 mils, just like that, and the rest is going to go into this jug. Okay, now for the naturally fermented or naturally carbonated ginger beer, I'm going to use about 1/3 of a cup of my ginger bug. And my ginger bug is pretty active, it's in good shape, and I think that should be enough to get us where we're going. So I'm going to put that in. And I know from previous tests that this yeast is only going to give me somewhere between 1.5% and 2% alcohol by volume when it ferments out. I'm just going to put in a little bit more. I think a little bit of the yeast settled in the bottom, so I want to put some more in. Okay. Stir that in. Now I've got flip-top beer bottles. These are really strong, actual beer bottles that will take the pressure. They're cleaned and sanitized. Yes, of course, I've sanitized my bottles. And we just stir in the ginger bug to make sure that it's evenly distributed. And then we just pour it into the bottles. Now, when you pour it in, you want to leave enough headspace for the expansion of gas while these ferment. So I just bring it up just a little bit past the shoulder, and that should be fine. Close it up, and move along. Okay, so last one. Seal it up. I'll leave these on the counter for 2, maybe 3 days to allow them to ferment and carbonate, and then I'll stick them in the fridge. And I'll see you in a few days, and we're going to do a tasting of both versions.
method of torture. Place someone's head inside of a bell and ring it. And eventually, they'll go insane. And eventually, they'll go insane. They'll go insane. They'll go insane. And eventually,
shop as usual, and avoid panic buying.